Hello and welcome to World Insight with Tian Wei, coming to you from Beijing on CGTN. Coming up on today's program, this year marks the 30th anniversary of strong people-to-people exchanges between China's mainland and Taiwan. What are the general prospects of cross-strait relations over the next few years? And I speak to two prominent female polar explorers. We learn about the icy glass ceilings they broke when they led an all-female expedition to ski to the South Pole.
And he said, well, you can do it. But you were also alone.
And we begin with the relations between the mainland and Taiwan. Although this year marks the 30th anniversary since the two sides resumed the people-to-people communication, current peaceful development of cross-strait relations has been severely threatened, some say. However, economic cooperation remains an unstoppable trend in the relationship. In this new reality, how can ties across the Taiwan Strait be revived? Take a look at this first.
Taiwan leader Tsai Ing-wen made a speech on Tuesday, causing backlash from parties within Taiwan. On cross-strait ties, she made no mention on respecting the One China principle, which serves as a political foundation for relations. Tsai's insistence on drifting further from the Chinese mainland is met with sharp words from the Chinese government. Ma Xiaoguang, spokesman for the State Council Taiwan Affairs Office, has earlier reiterated China's consistent policy on Taiwan, urging the Democratic Progressive Party to give up Taiwan independence efforts.
Only by upholding the One China principle can cross-strait relations return to the path of peaceful development to the benefit of compatriots across the Taiwan Strait.
Cross-strait relations have cooled significantly since Tsai took office in May 2016.
For more on cross-strait relations, we are joined in our Beijing studio, Mr. Ye Hailin, who is the director of the Center for South Asia Studies at the National Institute of International Strategy at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Welcome, sir. Also joining us in Taipei, we have Mrs. Joanna Lei, who is now the Chief Executive Officer of the Changhua 21st Century Think Tank. I want to welcome to both of you. Mrs. Lei, how shall we take a look at the relations now across the straits? Some say it is quite strained over the past few years. Are we likely to see some new prospect, let's just say after the 19th Party Congress, when China's mainland have a very strong agenda already? Ms. Lei.
Well, certainly the cross-strait relations has taken a turn to a low point since Tsai Ing-wen took office in May 2016. It is primarily due to a discourse or disagreement over the 1992 consensus. People probably remember that she has never responded to the One China principles formally or directly. Recently, Tsai Ing-wen has proposed that the cross-strait relations should go into a new era with new discourses of 12 different themes, and she certainly hopes that there will be, quote-unquote, a new normal, a new model across Taiwan Straits after the 19th Party Congress. And having said that, I think it is fairly clear to people in Taiwan that mainland China has drawn a very clear red line. That is, you have to address in one way, shape, or another the 1992 consensus issue. That is, whether people across Taiwan Straits or regimes across Taiwan Straits belong to One China. If Tsai Ing-wen refuses to address this issue, we really do not see her proposal of a new discourse or new normal will be taken positively by mainland China.
From the mainland's perspective, Mr. Ye,
yes,
what could be the next step forward? Because at this point, Tsai Ing-wen just did not respond to that demand coming from the mainland, as Mrs. Lei articulated very clearly, the 1992 consensus. The reason why this is important is because it recognizes One China and Taiwan is part of China. So what is going to be the next step from the mainland if Tsai Ing-wen keep on doing what she's doing right now?
I think if Tsai Ing-wen still refusing to recognize the 92 consensus, mainland had to prepare the second-hand plan. It's not only upon to how the cross-strait relationship can go in the perspective of the economic cooperation, people-to-people context. we should remember the one very essential thing is that 92 consensus is the consensus, means it's far away from the Taiwan's stance. It's also far away from the mainland stance. So the 92 consensus only laid the foundation to normalize or stabilize the situation. But since the Tsai Ing-wen doesn't recognize such kind of the essential condition for the normalization of the cross-strait relationship, mainland had to prepare another plan for the final resolution, because we should know, maintain the status quo is not the target of the mainland. Reunification is the target of the mainland. So we have two channels to reach this goal. One, through the negotiation, through based on the 92 consensus.
All right.
Another one is not so peaceful.
Okay, Mrs. Lei, you heard certainly very different opinions coming from Mr. Ye here from the mainland. Well, of course, he's not speaking for the government, but rather speaking as a scholar here. Not many other options, it seems, facing Taiwan right now. Economically speaking, you know the story. The mainland Taiwan exchange is so crucial for Taiwan's economy. Secondly, when it comes to international status, certainly Taiwan is not going to be recognized anywhere as an independent entity with a different name. And thirdly, when you look at the so-called allies of Taiwan, the United States, we see some very different decision-makings in Washington these days, and very different ally relationship between the United States and some of the other countries or regions. So what are the options that Mrs. Tsai could play with these days? Mrs. Lei, what do you think?
Well, certainly what you stated are being experienced. Taiwan is now currently facing challenges economically, financially, and diplomatic-wise worldwide. And Tsai Ing-wen has tried to circumvent a China-dominant era in the sense that economically she's proposing a southbound policy, bringing Taiwan businessmen towards Southeast Asia. Diplomatically, she's trying to forge stronger relationship with Japan and United States. Both are well-intended. However, both will not be successful without at least a peaceful consent by mainland China, which is the sad reality to Ms. Tsai Ing-wen. If she examines the recent history, since 1949, Taiwan has been under regular constant threat of military reunification with mainland China. It's only in recent years that we have struck a peace co-development strategy, and people across Taiwan Straits are experiencing a more friendly discourse. If Tsai Ing-wen refused to recognize that we have to reach a peaceful development through consensus, that she would go back to years back when cross-straits are in some form of hostility and even military confrontation. And that certainly would not be for the benefit of the people in Taiwan. So as leader of Taiwan, she will have to face the stern reality and also increasing pressure from mainland China.
Mrs. Lei, you see this trend. I mean, in a way you talk about there has to be some kinds of attitude, positive ones, of course, coming from the mainland before Taiwan could develop even further relationship with the United States or with Japan. You see the Japanese Prime Minister coming even to the receptions of the National Day for China in Japan. You also see that the United States, when the Secretary of State Tillerson visited China, he was also emphasizing with the Chinese side, talking about the one country, one China policy. And also, the U.S. President is going to visit China very soon in November. I'm sure that policy and that principle is going to be restated by the mainland very clearly to the American guests. So without much space to maneuver around for her own agenda, Ms. Tsai probably had to look for options. What could be some of the options? Is her so-called 12 possibilities the options to be studied, or actually it's only makeup or rhetorics? Mrs. Lei, what is your judgment?
Well, certainly you're right in the sense that cross-strait relations, from Tsai Ing-wen's point of view, having a lot of boundary conditions, not the least of which is geopolitical balance of powers, and those were decided by major powers and their individual national interests. So in that sense, if Tsai Ing-wen recognizes the boundary conditions, she has to go down one level to pragmatic and practical issues. Those are the 12 themes for future discourses. You can see that they do not address those grand strategies across countries, but rather very pragmatic and practical issues across Taiwan Straits. Having said that, I think Tsai Ing-wen still in the hope of her mind that she can build very strong relationship with Japan from family, friends, and long-term affiliation between DPP and Japan. And she also hopes that with certain support of the U.S. fractions, Taiwan will be used or at least be considered as one of the major chips on the block of the U.S. grand strategy in West Pacific.
But Mr. Ye, you see changes that's already happening, as we both mentioned earlier. And now here is the thing. What is going to be the role, as the mainland see it, of the opposition parties in Taiwan? For example, the Kuomintang, where Mrs. Lei was originally coming from and was a member of. What role is that going to play? After all, the Chinese Communist Party, Mr. Ye, have been, in a way, with better terms with the Kuomintang.
It depends on the nature of the opposite party. Whether this party is support the final unification of Cross-Strait or only support maintain the status quo. I think for the past years we can verify the mainland China's policy towards the other side of the Cross-Strait, that China, the mainland support any political forces to maintain the status quo, maintain the stability across the strait. But now, I think it's a time for mainland to think that we need to support the political forces in the island who support the final unification, not only maintain the status quo. We know there are some difficulties in this island that the people, it's really difficult to say, to publicly say that they support the unification, but it's the time for China, for mainland to release such kind of the signal that the mainland were prepared and determined to support any elements, any political party to support the final unification. And that's the very key signal for the two peoples across the strait.
Mrs. Lei, as you may see, Mr. Ye is a very strong-worded and strong-minded person here coming from the mainland. Having said that, though, we do see there are certain messages across the street, in a way, between the mainland, the Chinese Communist Party, and also the Kuomintang. But the question is Kuomintang strong enough these days to have a very well-articulated consensus within the party itself? And secondly, is it going to be a very strong opposition party even in Taiwan before we talk about any other further consensus Kuomintang could reach with the Chinese Communist Party regarding the status quo of the mainland and Taiwan? Mrs. Lei.
Well, certainly the 2016 election has been a landslide victory for Tsai Ing-wen and DPP. In that election, KMT not only lost the leadership position, but also lost in the Legislative Yuan, which represents the people. Having said that, KMT is still the largest opposition party with about 1/3 of the seats in the Legislative Yuan, having the only official position that can wage certain check and balance to DPP. I do find the KMT quite chaotic even to this date in terms of the new direction. After the election of Wu Dunyi, he has to maneuver and also have to mobilize all the forces and find the heart and soul of KMT. KMT has been playing a election tactic, which is Me Too. They try to Me Too all the major statements and major tactics of DPP to minimize differences between the two parties. And having pursued that in those 8 years of Ma Ying-jeou's reign, making DPP making DPP a clear leader in all major social issues and political issues in Taiwan. So KMT will have to find its new heart and soul, has to find its new reason for being, and has to be able to wage new policy issues. If Wu Dunyi can do that between now and 2018, there can be a chance for KMT to regain its support from the Pan-Blue supporters.
Yeah, but Mrs. Lei, what are we talking about? Are we talking about the election politics strategies for the KMT? Or are we talking about a soul searching of the KMT about what exactly its mission should be, particularly regarding its role in Taiwan and also Taiwan's future vis-a-vis legislative relations with the mainland? Because we certainly see some very clear signs for the future of relationship across the Taiwan Straits. Mrs. Lei.
Well, I think it can be two in one. Look at how Tsai Ing-wen won the 2016 election. She ran on 5 ideological platforms. Those are very strong DPP political platforms, and she ran on those platforms and won a landslide election. So at the same time, KMT will have to search its heart and soul and find its reason for being, and also run a very strong election based on its party platforms. Right now, if you look at the party platforms between KMT and DPP, you actually find no difference. And if there are no difference, why should people buy a Me Too product and not to buy the original one?
Mr. Ye, do you agree with that, that the opposition party probably have to do 2 in 1? One is to search the soul and try to understand what is going to be its real mission for Taiwan. And secondly, it's going to work at the same time for the election politics as well. Is that really going to happen, Mr. Ye?
I think so. It could happen. Let's verify the past 8 years what happened for the KMT. KMT want to minimize these differences with the Progress DPP. And so what happened for the KMT? Marginalized. So that's the reason why when the party lost its soul and only fighting for the election campaign, it's what will happen. So we can learn from the history and to tell the future and let the KMT to find what's the real basis for this party in the island and try to fight for his core concept. I think it's the time for the KMT really rethinking his policy on the election.
But
not
Mr.
only
Ye,
focusing on the election.
Yeah, but not only focusing on the election, but rather looking at the bigger picture. But yet, Mr. Ye, the bigger picture, is that going to help Taiwan and the KMT come ever closer to the idea, once again embracing 1992 consensus, of course, but on the other hand, trying to cultivate some kind of better atmosphere and better relationship and possibly better potential for the cross-strait relations?
I think this required both sides need to work together. I mean, for the Communist Party in mainland and the KMT in island, they need to work more closer to try to release a very clear signal that both two parties are fighting for the same goal, the long-term peace and stability across the strait, only based on the 92 consensus. If the KMT afraid of to mention the consensus to the Taiwan people and the Communist Party in the mainland doesn't care about what the KMT said.
Right.
So what will happen for the consensus? The consensus will be forgotten by this island, and the DPP will win for a very long term.
How much do you think there's likely to be new approaches, new strategies as a result of new realities, Mrs. Lei, when it comes to cross-strait relations?
I think we're already at the receiving end of the sophisticated mainland China policy toward Taiwan. If you look at recent rhetoric and policies, you can see that mainland China has drawn very clear red lines for Taiwan not to cross, such as declaring Taiwan independence, of course. But outside of those really clear red lines, there are a lot of issues and a lot of exchanges directed towards the middle class, the young people, and also allowing more Taiwanese to have first-hand experiences with mainland China and even participate in the grand strategy of One Belt, One Road in mainland China's future. So those are opportunities open to Taiwan regardless of people's personal identification of China or not. Those people could still be pragmatic and see opportunities open up to them by mainland China.
Right.
So I can see a very sophisticated Taiwan policy, while very, very strong and stern military warnings is always at the backbone and behind the red lines. within the boundaries, there will be greater opportunities open to Taiwanese and even the young people who currently may not even think themselves to be identified with China. That's, of course, due to the textbook and Li Denghui's China policy over the last 12 years.
That's right. We only have less than a minute to go. Mr. Ye, from the mainland's perspective, on the one hand, the education should be about, of course, eventual unification and also, of course, to say the least, a better relationship across the Taiwan Strait. But on the other hand, there is an issue of how to get the mainlanders also more sophisticated about the nature of cross-strait relations and how to achieve a better prospect, not just through nationalism. Mr. Ye.
I don't think it's the unification is about the nationalism, or the nationalism is something based behind the unification. The unification is the essential goal of the people in China, no matter in which side of the strait. So in my personal perspective, that the mainland should do more to release this information to the people who live in Taiwan Island, to tell the people that the final unification is the essential goal of the mainland, and it will be reached within years. Such kind of the status quo won't maintain for eternity. The information must be released very clearly, and mainland should support any political parties in the island who really support the final unification.
Right.
And that's very clear for sure. Maintain the status quo is only for a certain period. It's not for eternity.
All right, we heard your very different opinions coming from the two of you, and certainly both of you want to see better ties across the Taiwan Straits, at least for the very short term. Ye Hailin, Joanna Lei, thank you so much for the two of you for being with us. Thank you for your analysis and also insights. You're watching World Insight with Tian Wei, still to come on our program. I speak with two prominent female polar explorers. I find out how these women prove their mettle to their male peers in searching both the North and the South Poles. You're watching World Insight on CGTN, coming to you from Beijing every Monday to Friday. In November 2000, two extraordinary female explorers, Anne Bancroft and Liv Arneson, began off their ambitious plan to cross Antarctica. Though their sail and ski journey was thwarted since early 2001 by a lack of wind, the pair were very close to reaching the South Pole. After 94 days, covering 2,400 miles, they became the first women to cross the frozen continent. One from the United States and one from Norway. How did Anne and Liv finally come together? And how were those historical days across the Antarctica being spent? Earlier, the two women adventurers shared these glorious days and interesting experiences with me.
Well, I had been on I had led an expedition across Greenland and then to the South Pole with a group of women. And we only got as far as the South Pole. And so I came back and I was very disappointed, and I made a promise to myself that if ever I could organize again another expedition, I would do it. And over the course of some years, I learned about Liv, because she followed the next year on her solo trip. And I thought, that's who I want to go with, because she can really ski. So years later, I wrote her a note.
I had been a cross-country skiing, and I also had crossed the Greenland ice cap. And when I came home for the Greenland ice cap, I did that with another woman.
Yeah.
And then I learned that this man was skiing to the South Pole, and followed his expedition. And when I came, after my Greenland expedition, I came home and said to my husband, maybe I should ski to the South Pole, because I had this dream since I was 8 years old, and he knew it.
Wow.
And he said, well, you can do it.
But you were also alone doing some of the expeditions compared to Anne.
I had a great time. But you know, I'm an introvert. I love poetry. I love literature. So I have so much. So I had a really good trip.
I'm sure during those trips you were not always as happy as you are talking to me right now.
No, I think I was really irritated and angry the first week because I came into an area with the snow was like frozen ocean, you know, stormy ocean, really big waves. So I was telling myself, okay, from tomorrow you imagine that you're skiing in a modern gallery of art. And then I started to ski and focused on the pattern in the snow, pattern in the clothes, and then combining that, because I also brought poetry, you know, my mind went all over. So I felt the energy come back.
Wow.
So that was fantastic. Because I was skiing in you know, this wide open space, it was some lines how the sound of the pine trees, you know, is swaying. Yeah. So because I was skiing in the wind, you know, really cold wind, but then I was sort of imagining when I was thinking about that line, this was this beautiful summer wind in the pine trees.
But then, when you were working together, what was that relationship like?
She came over to my home state in Minnesota in the U.S., and we walked for a week talking. We did not talk about Antarctica, really. We talked about our families, and we talked about our past expeditions as women and how that made us feel and why we wanted to share it to a broader audience, you know, that responsibility we felt as women at first. And we talked about education and how we were mixing them with our expeditions. And we found that not only our past expeditions were somewhat similar, Greenland, things like that. The literature that we read was very familiar. Right. Our family systems were familiar. That we had this, Liev calls it sister spirit, but we had this foundation of a friendship that was so quick. We're both introverts, so we don't have to talk all the time. We both love to read. So life for 97 days on Antarctica was mostly very smooth.
Oh my God.
We made decisions almost like without conversation sometimes. There was no leader. We did everything together. It's a very unusual thing, I think.
Is it intentional? There is no leader?
It was intentional.
Did you guys talk about this?
Yes.
And why?
I think because we both felt that we had the same experience, we both had the same background, and it was you know, two people that we had the same vision of this expedition, and then it's easy, you know, because we are going in that direction. Yeah. Okay, if there's something that we have to discuss, we'll figure it out.
Day and night together, no fight?
I can tell you about the morning. No, I can tell you about the mornings.
Okay, all right.
Because
Somebody's laughing. Somebody's laughing.
Because okay. I'm up early, getting out of the tent, getting some stuff in my sled, whistling and singing because it's such a beautiful day.
She's a whistler.
Yeah, I'm a whistler. And when I come back to the tent, because Anne is would like to be a little bit longer in the sleeping bag, and she said, Liev, you know that material in the tent is very thin.
Very polite, I have to say, under the circumstances. Yeah.
Well, I tried to, you know, pull myself together in the mornings, not being so happy and whistling.
So loud.
So loud.
Eventually, it turned out well. So, what has taught you about yourself, about women, about what these expeditions could do?
So, you know, we got response from kids because we actually brought a satellite phone. And at the end of the expedition, we had to fly the last few miles because of the time schedule. And we were really down. Instead of thinking about actually what we have achieved, skied 3,000 kilometers, we reached 6 million kids in 116 countries. Yeah. So we had actually reached our goals because the educational part was the most important. And then we were just sitting here about the few miles we hadn't actually to. So, and then we were talking to the kids, and they were sort of supporting us, and said, "You have changed your life. Now I know what, you know, what different things." And they said, "Well, are you sure that you want to go? It will be good to have such a good friend. Are you sure you want to go home? Was what a girl was saying. And one said, I can't understand that you haven't been quarreling. Do you have some good advice? My parents also need the advice. She said. So it's such comments. And we were sitting with the cell phone, the satellite phone between, and I got, I was really moved. But then after I felt my tears, I was just looking over to Anne. Tears there as well. And then we just looked at each other. Here we are sitting, depressed, feeling sorry for yourself for these few miles and listening to these kids. We have reached our goals. Let's talk about that rather than these few miles.
Yeah. What about for you?
I think we're always moved by the people that engage with our expeditions. And, we focus on young people. But that expedition was somewhat of a surprise for us because we had women. We were in our 40s. And we were chasing a childhood dream, I say. We had dreamed about Antarctica separately for so many of our young years. And women around the world were writing us and saying, I'm watching you two follow your dream and you're in your 40s. That means I can perhaps dust off one of mine and do it because I've been so busy raising a family or taking care of an aging parent or doing a job. I have dreams I still want to do, and it's not too late. So that was a whole group of people that we didn't go to inspire. And what I've learned, this is the same with teaching, is that when you try and inspire someone, oftentimes you get a huge dose of inspiration yourself from their stories.
Beautifully said. For women adventurers, it is not easy to take arduous expeditions with their male co-workers, especially for Anne and Liv, as female pioneers in the Arctic and Antarctic journeys. In 1986, Anne Bancroft became the first woman to reach the North Pole on foot and sled with 5 other male team members after 56 days. And in 1994, Liv Arneson made international headlines, becoming the first woman in the world to ski solo to the South Pole. How do these stories resonate with their female identity? I asked them about that. Anne, tell me about yours. 1980s, you were already planning to go to the North and the South Pole. What was it like?
Well, it was an amazing time. I was a young 30-year-old woman, a teacher, and I had been dreaming about the top and the bottom of the world since I was a young girl, and I had an opportunity to go to the North Pole in 1986 with 7 men and 49 male dogs. And it changed my life. It taught me that my outdoor love and my educational love could actually come together.
And that was also the very first time women were being invited to be on that kind of expedition.
Well, I think I felt a lot of pressure because women were writing me all over the world about their excitement in seeing a woman doing something that hadn't been done before by a woman, but also in an environment that was already so foreign to so many people, the top of the world. Most people don't want to go there. So there was a lot of attention, and I felt the weight of the expectation on my shoulders because I just wanted to do it. I didn't want to do it for any purpose other than my own dream.
You're working on it for the half of the population of the world.
Yeah.
So
but later on I realized that was important work too. That other women, women such as yourself, are blazing trails in other mediums, other careers, and that helps us all as women take the next step. So that was really a very profound experience. And then the other thing is that I'm living a childhood dream in such a harsh environment. It was the hardest work I'd ever done in my life. I felt like quitting sometimes, but then, that I'd see an extraordinary scene and then you get re-energized, or, one of the dogs gives you a big lick in the face and the world is right again.
Do you have a favorite among the 47?
Of course I do.
What is that?
Sam.
Oh, Sam. All right. Sam is a great pilot.
He was very handsome.
Yeah. Oh. What about the other men that are on the trip? They were helping you, or sometimes there could be some kind of conflict?
Well, we're, you know, it's an interesting mix because we were very good friends and we still are, but we would have conflict. I would feel sometimes that they would not listen. They would talk over me, or they would give me compliments sometimes for things that they wouldn't give one of the guys a compliment about. And
that's not a compliment, as you may know.
Yes, and it would get, over time, it would get quite irritating, and I would try and explain that to them, and they didn't always understand.
How did you explain? Shout? Or
some days.
Or sometimes in a very genuine and ladylike way. It's hard, isn't it, in the
Sometimes
wild?
I had tantrums, and I could be difficult, and sometimes I would use humor. I think humor gets you many places, and I think just telling a story would oftentimes illuminate the feeling of what I was feeling better than me just trying to put words on it. You know, I would just simply tell a story of why are you complimenting me for this, and then this big guy comes in after me and he's had a worse day than me, and nobody says anything. They don't say good things or bad things. So, you know, it's how do you keep their ears open to what you want them to hear? And I'm ready.
That's Anne's experience, but what about Liv, for you? I mean, you travel mainly on your own at the very beginning.
Yeah, I had one solo expedition, but I just had to comment because I also been in expedition being the only woman. And my feeling is that being a woman, it's easier for the men to talk about their feelings to a woman. I think we have discussing that before, rather than to the men. So we were sort of the mother, become the mothers of the, you know.
Do you want to be in that role?
No, I don't want to be. But I think that feels safer to talk about their feelings to a woman rather to a man in his
But what about for you? I mean, do you want to talk to them?
No, I just wanted to, you know, to reach the summit as they did. But you know, if they had, you know, was longing home or had a bad day or something, it was easier to talk to me rather to tell one of their friends.
What kind of support would they offer for you?
Oh, they were very supportive. Well, I got, for instance, when I was climbing Everest, I got altitude sickness. So they were very, you know, very careful with that, so I shouldn't push myself too hard, so, for instance. So they're looking after me. Then I realized that I was getting sick.
When you reflect back, do you look at yourself at the time as, I am very different. I'm a very different person on this team. Or you consider yourself to fit in as soon as possible. I am just a member of the team. The sex doesn't matter, or does it still matter?
The outdoor world is so physically oriented that you have to be big and strong to achieve these things. And that's a myth, really. It's really about working together. And some teams recognize that if you really want to achieve something and you have this group of people, it's better that you play on all your strengths and weaknesses. And one of the things I learned on the North Pole trip is that I was physically the smallest, and of course I don't compete with a 200-pound 6'6" man. You know, he's just huge. And but my mental strength, I knew, was strong. I knew I could do what I was setting out to do. And it was really illuminating that had actually more value. You know, a sense of humor. How is your attitude when the weather is horrible? How do you interact with your team members, etc.? And how well do you know yourself? Those are much bigger attributes for the group dynamic and success ultimately than sort of the physical strength.
And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, visit our website or try to find for us World Insight CGTN in your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on World Insight team, thanks for watching. And tune in again next time for insights from across China and around the world. Good night.